What's going on, my broskiis? My name is Toadskii, back again, here to bring you guys yet another One Piece Treasure Cruise video, and we're here with the final day of Grand Party. Thankfully, it's finally here, the final day of Grand Party, so we don't have to worry about it for yet another month. But yeah, let's see if we can reach those 14 victories. That's what we're looking for. Unfortunately, if you guys missed it, I was unable to secure the 3 wins in yesterday. I unfortunately did lose a match, which means that there's no way that we can reach the maximum rewards. However, I must say that, even if you do reach 14 wins, you still get pretty good rewards overall, so that's what obviously we're going to be aiming for. So we are up against an Uta GP leader this time around. Luckily, I was actually able to avoid, running into the situation where you could only challenge opposing Rogers, which is something that I always want to do. I never really want to go against Roger. If I have a way to get around it, I would love to do it just because of the opposing GP burst skill being as oppressive as it is. But anyways, up against Uta, we know that that skill will be kind of annoying, and, obviously we only need to win 2 wins, and luckily that Uta's special can only be launched once throughout the entire of the 3 matches, or the 3 games inside the match, so that I know that, whenever they use that burst skill, obviously it's going to be very detrimental to us, but we have our burst which can launch multiple times, so we can save it for multiple different games, which is good. So this is going to be a pretty clean victory, though. It is a Dex team versus the opposing Quick team. We actually we secured it pretty comfortably. I did change it around a little bit where I put Dalton and a bunch of other Rumble Rare recruits on the team instead of having the 5 legends, including Legend Brook. I wanted to add a bit more pressure on the opposing side, and I felt like having Brook sometimes can be detrimental to the crew. Despite the fact that Brook adds a lot of bulk and healing mechanics, I felt like I wanted to assert more offensive pressure on the opponent. So due to the fact that we could see that the GP leader was on match number 2, or game 2, we knew that it was going to be an int-driven team walking into it. So I opted just to use the side team, and look, especially with this seasonal buffs, going up against int-driven is not the ideal scenario here. So, at the end of the day, I was totally expecting to lose this one. I do know that if I do use my GP burst skill, that when the opposing side actually just knocks out all of our team, we should get the GP burst ready once again. So I was quite comfortable in using a GP burst skill in this match, despite the fact that I knew that we weren't really going to win this game. However, in day 3 or day 4, there was a really weird matchup where my side team was actually able to beat an int-driven team with no GP burst skill applied. It was very, very bizarre. But in most situations, especially with the seasonal buffs, you're gonna lose this matchup in Driven versus Sai. It is what it is. You do see the opponent does have the Uta burst ready to go. I was hoping that potentially they were gonna save it because I might have been able to just win this matchup, but due to the GP burst, I'm pretty sure that is the reason why we pretty much lost this game. It was just too much damage that the opposing side did to us. Even though Oda knocked out so many characters, we action binded the Uta to suppress her skill, of course, but then the bench units are just incredibly strong with the Dory, the Broggy, and the Smoker, and unfortunately Moria still isn't down yet, and those half stats are so oppressive. I absolutely hate half stats. I think it's probably one of the worst mechanics that they've introduced into Rumble in general. Half stats are just way too OP, and I mean, if you think about it, right, like if Gold Roger was introduced in today's day and age, his special would be a lot more broken, applying half stats rather than attack down, defense down, speed down. But either way, we'll see how this one goes. You see that it's a pretty clean victory for the opposing side. Despite the fact we actually did pretty good damage to them, it was a relatively close game, but all things considered, Moria launching another special, halving stats again, and that's just going to wrap it up. And then we move on to the final game. Of course, I was just blindsided into this one. We didn't know what the opposing team was going to be. So I opted for slashes, and we do have our Roger GP burst skill. So the slashes with the GP burst, typically things will go your way in most matchups. And then when I did see that it was an opposing Dex team, I felt very comfortable. Slashes actually have a pretty good matchup versus Dex, due to the fact that Dex take a lot of time to output their specials. They're not very fast with their CT and such. So the fact that we could get our CT up very fast, we can use our specials before the opponent, and especially applying half stats to them, characters like Roger and Newgate, it's a guaranteed double knockout, and especially with the way that Luffy works, where he's able to resurrect one of your Dex allies once, it essentially automatically will proc that. So basically, after we proc that Luffy passive ability to revive someone, we know that from there, we can just get the clean knockout. So luckily for us, we timed the skill just right, where we get Roger Whitebeard to go straight after the launch, get the double knockout, but more importantly, we knocked out the Doflamingo, which was the character that I was most scared of. He does the most damage on the opposing side, so the fact that we're able to knock him out that quickly is very, very impressive. And you even see Cracker, like, he's not the biggest damage outputting character in the game, but with half stats, he just does so much. And then, of course, the fixed damage and then the additional damage from Odin is so good. Now, at this point, we have K-Dad, which is going to apply a little bit of defense down and then some single target attacks. I'm really impressed with K-Dad. I think they're actually a really solid addition to Slashes. You see getting the knockout on the Luffy, which is also very important. Remember that if Luffy launches a special when he's below 50% HP, he does max charge one of his Dex allies, which can be very bad, especially if Doflamingo is on the team. I'll leave you guys with the rest of this clip and we'll move on to match number 2. Moving on to the second match here, we are running pretty much the same sort of squad, once again up against an Uta leader, but we do see that there is a quick team up front, an unknown team number 2, but then the int-driven team is going to be the final team. Now, with the way that you know how Uta works, it would make a lot of sense if the middle team is going to be a Psy team, because I believe Uta does boost int Psy and driven, I believe. But once again, we're in the same predicament as last time, right? Where we know that Dex should have a pretty comfortable matchup against the opposing quick team. So I feel comfortable in saying that, you know, that's going to be a pretty easy victory, which means we just need to win one of the other 2 matchups. Either against the unknown team, which I'm assuming was going to be Psy, or the int-driven team. And I know that going against int-driven is very difficult to do. So we see that, luckily for us here, then once again, this is the Dex team that does not have the Brook on it, so it's more offensively focused. And because we have done that, we actually get some pretty good damage off on the opponent, and the fact that Blackbeard launches so quickly here is so good for us. The defense down, the health cut, the fixed damage, it's so strong against these quick squads here. And then Dalton's just sitting at the front tanking all the hits for us, which is great. So it actually allows the rest of our quick units, or Dex units should I say, have a lot more HP. But that's also a bad thing, because if we kill the opponent too quickly, we're just not going to get the burst skill ready for Roger, which is, you know, really bad, because we actually want to have that for the next matchup. We want to secure victory in the next matchup, and the fact that we may not have it is kind of annoying. You see Luffy coming in, actually getting a double knockout, knocking out the Akainu and the Kaido, which is so good. And then you see the opponents come in with their heavy-hitting bench units. Orochi, I've come up against him a couple of times in this Grand Party season, and I've actually been impressed with what the opposing Orochis have been able to do. Specifically, special binding the Dex characters that I've had on my team has been super annoying. So shout out to Orochi. He's actually a pretty decent Rumble unit, I must say. Especially coming up against him, like defensively focus-wise, Orochi's very good. And you see Doflamingo is able to secure victory for us there, which is great. So now I was in the predicament of, what did I want to use next? Did I want to use my Slasher team against the unknown? Did I want to use my Psy team against the unknown? I wasn't really too sure what I wanted to do here. I actually can't remember what I actually opted to do. I think I ended up using my Slasher team, because I know that Slashers are going to get their specials up very quickly, and the fact that the Slashers are not very good defensively, I know that they're going to tank a lot of damage very early, which should enable us to launch our GP burst skill, which was the whole ideology as to why I decided to go in this manner. But once again, this is the exact same team structure that we had before. Doflamingo being driven should allow him to go first before most of the characters on my team. However, you do see that the opposing team does have Wano Law, which does debuff the CT of Cracker as well as Doflamingo. So those two characters getting a little bit less CT than what they would typically get is not ideal at all. And the fact that they use Strucin as well, which is a very interesting pick. I see a lot of people opt to use Strucin. Not a terrible pick. He does apply a lot of buffs and debuffs, which is nice. But surprisingly, Doflamingo is still able to launch first, and then we get the Roger Whitebeard. But we get incredibly lucky with Roger Whitebeard, knocking out Odin and Yamato. And I knew at that point, I pretty much couldn't lose it from here. Like, something catastrophic has to go wrong for me to lose this game from here. That was just the most incredible luck, being able to knock out both of those guys with the Roger Whitebeard. Like, it's literally the most ideal scenario. So I couldn't have asked for really much else. And see the Uta burst come in, which is going to be annoying, but I believe it does fully charge our Roger burst, so I felt comfortable, you know, let's just go ahead and use it. We've got 2 bursts. Even if all my characters go down, it should fully charge my GP burst again. But the fact that it doesn't get an additional knockout, halving of stats as well, just to ensure that we can survive some of these hits. That was the whole thinking behind it. And yeah, Kuzan only doing fixed damage will not be enough to knock us out. Broggy also coming in the back end, which enables us to get some pretty good damage output against the opponent. And being a 7v1, we secure victory. Alright, now we move into the final matchup of the video, which is going to be a very similar looking team, but we're up against an opposing versus Kaido. So the fact that we cannot see anyone is a little scary, a little frightening. We do know Int Driven is going to be the first team, or the second team should I say, as the leader is going to be there. However, the first team was a complete unknown. I had no idea what to expect, and surprisingly, the Psy team was the first team to come up here. And it is interesting that Psy is even on this team in the first place, the fact that slashes get debuffed, and like also the fact that Psy teams do not get additional buffs. Like none of these units on the opposing team get buffed by the opposing versus Kaido GP leader skill. So the fact that there's a Psy team in general on this team is just really, really weird. But yeah, was not expecting that at all, and I wasn't really expecting too much to really go in my favor in this matchup either. And you see here that the opposing Yamato just doing the half stats, and I do opt to use the Roger GP burst here just to see if I'm able to potentially sneak a win against the opponent here. You do see that I actually opted to switch my Dex team back because I was a little frightened as to what I was going to come up against, and I wanted to have additional bulk. But realistically, looking back at it, I kind of wish I had it the other way around, where I had my, Rumble Rare recruits. I think it would have probably worked out a little bit better in my favor in this matchup. Would have worked out so that I would have been able to, at least win the matchup a little bit more comfortably. But surprisingly, I was still able to pull out a victory. I don't know how I was able to do it, but the Dex team was able to beat the Psy team, luckily. Typically, those can be 50-50. I've seen them go both ways for sure, so the fact that we were able to get that victory there is really good. Now, once again, we did know that this was going to be the Int-driven team, and as we've already talked about in multiple of these videos in this GP season, Int-driven is not what you want to go up against typically, so I opted to just use this team, see what happens. Not expecting too much here, of course. Now, I do have my GP burst skill. However, I am opting to save it because I know that this is not a favorable matchup for me this season. So my thinking here is, yeah, even though if I get my GP burst skill, I'm not even going to use it. I'm just going to see what happens because I have had this team beat the Int-driven team without using the burst before. If we win, that is awesome. If we don't, then we're going to have the GP burst skill for the final game. Now, it's very, very odd that the opponent opts to use the versus Kaido burst skill right there because it does do like a lot of defense down to our squad, which is not good. But ideally, the versus Kaido burst skill, you want to use it when there's 50 seconds or less remaining, because that does guarantee damage to Psy characters, and if that happens, we just straight up lose, like 100%, that just 100% wins them the game. But because the AI is not very intelligent in terms of the way that they use the burst skill, that was a little bit more favorable for us. But in this point here, we know that there is just no coming back from this. There's really no way we can win. Like, our entire front line has half stats, and then Kid knocks out 3 of the units. I just opt to skip it because there's no way that we can win the matchup from there. So now we get to the final game of the final match of the season of Grand Party. Now it's the Slasher team on my end versus an opposing unknown team. But we do have the Roger GP burst skill, which is very, very favorable for us. And we do see a Dex team, and when I saw it was a Dex team, I felt very, very comfortable, and also very comfortable in the fact that there's no Rumble Rare Recruit King on the bench. Some people have opted to do that on their Dex teams, and that becomes very, very annoying to come up against. But in this scenario here, I felt very comfortable in the way that we should be able to close out this match. We've already showcased this before, but, you know, the Slasher team being able to get essentially a double knockout with Roger Whitebeard automatically proccing the Luffy effect, and it is the most ideal scenario to get Roger and Whitebeard to launch as soon as possible, ideally before all the rest of our characters have launched, before our characters have launched their specials, because we want to activate the Luffy passive ability before everyone else. And once again, luckily, Roger and Whitebeard do launch, we do get the double knockout, automatically activating the Luffy's Rumble ability, and then we can get the rest of our specials to start asserting a bit more pressure on the opponent. You see that V2 Durfee does come in off the bench, but it is still, you know, in the first 40 seconds of the match, so he doesn't do the double strike, which is lucky for us. Luffy is not below 50%, so he doesn't fully charge one of the characters, which is what I was looking for there. Luckily, he is not below 50%, and then we see Odin come in doing massive damage, and from this point onward, and the fact that K-Dad launched the special before the bench units came in, which means we were guaranteed the knockouts on Doflamingo and the Luffy, and from that point, we just straight up win the match. So that is going to wrap it up for me. An interesting season for sure. I'm glad that the season is concluded though, because those Rumble rules were pretty scary and not ideal, not fun to go up against at all. That is going to wrap it up for me though. At the end of this clip though, you'll see a limited pool ticket, so make sure to stick around for that. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and if you guys did, make sure to leave a like. On that, I'll see you guys within the next video.
攻め足りないのよね。